Nyckoles Harbor and some other players from the 2023 recruiting class will be the group that sets the floor for the South Carolina Gamecocks this upcoming fall.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, your show for the latest headlines and potential storylines on South Carolina Gamecock athletics. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also a staff writer for Gamecocks Digest over on SI.com. Thank y'all for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and also wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. South Carolina brought in a really good recruiting class from the 2023 cycle, their best recruiting class in several years. And this class included a bevy of guys like Nyckoles Harbor, Vicari, Swain, Grayson, Pup Howard, Desmond Umeozulu, Markee and plenty of other guys as well. And when it comes to the players that are going to set the floor and the ceiling for South Carolina's football team in 2023, it'll be Nyckoles Harbor and some other freshmen from the Gamecocks 2023 recruiting class that sets the floor for the Gamecocks this upcoming fall. Another way to put it is this: Spencer Rattler and the veterans, they're going to decide the ceiling for this team, basically how good the team could be, while the young bucks, or the true freshmen, and their ability to adjust to everything this upcoming season will decide the floor for South Carolina, meaning that they could either elevate expectations for the Gamecocks as the season progresses or lower the expectations depending on, again, how they adjust to the collegiate game. Now, I'm not going to break this down by multiple position groups in terms of all the true freshmen, but more so select a few specific guys on either side of the ball. So, let's start off with the offensive side of the ball, and arguably the biggest name from South Carolina's 2023 recruiting class in Nyckoles Harbor. Now, obviously, Harbor is a world-class athlete, and in terms of his pure athleticism, maybe one of the best prospects the Gamecocks have ever brought into their program, and obviously the biggest signing that Shane Beamer and his staff have had since they started out here in Columbia back in the offseason in 2020. Now, Harbor is going to primarily play the wide receiver position this upcoming season, and at this position, there's a big question mark regarding who is going to step up behind Antoine Juice Wells. You've got guys that could step up here like Xavier Legette, Eddie Lewis, the transfer from Memphis, and also Amarian Brown. So you got a couple of veterans there, but admittedly, there's a pretty significant drop-off after those three guys. Now, Harbor is going to admittedly need some time to adjust to the college game, more so than a lot of these other guys that we're going to talk about, because, again, he has not played wide receiver a whole heck of a lot. He got some snaps in high school, but private school football is a lot different than SEC level football. So I'm thinking that sometime in the second half of the year, maybe get some of these teams like Florida, or maybe Texas A&M, Kentucky, Clemson. At that point, Nyckoles Harbor could be starting to find his stride. So how does he help set the floor for the Gamecocks in 2023? Well, South Carolina's going to look for him to develop into a complementary piece in the wide receiver room and essentially just be a guy that Spencer Rattler can rely on in terms of throwing the football to him and being an extra target out there alongside Antoine Juice Wells and some of these other guys. Now, another player on the offensive side of the ball that could help set the floor for this team is offensive lineman Markee Anderson. Markee Anderson is one of the best offensive line prospects that the Gamecocks have ever signed in modern recruiting history. Anderson participated in spring ball with the team and saw snaps at both left guard and left tackle. And while Markee projects to be an interior offensive lineman throughout his career here at South Carolina, he could end up playing at multiple different spots this next season because the depth across the offensive line is a significant issue. So for Markee Anderson, the Gamecocks are going to look for him to be a reliable rotating piece at the minimum for this next season because Shane Beamer has said he is going to step foot on the field. He is going to play. And who knows, if Markee Anderson performs well enough, or maybe some guys get banged up in front of him, which is bound to happen at a certain position this next season, then he could wind up being a starter for this team by season's end. And if he does either of those things, Markee Anderson is going to help elevate that floor for South Carolina's football program in 2023. And the last guy I want to discuss from the offensive side of the ball is running back Dontavious Braswell, the lone running back signee from the 2023 class. Now, Braswell maybe did not have all the big name programs that some other prospects had pursuing them, but make no mistake, Braswell is a really key get here for South Carolina. He's a kid that is noted for the most part for his overall speed. I want to say that he was a 200-meter dash champion at the 2A level in Georgia while he was in high school. So Braswell is going to bring an extra gear to this running back room. A running back room in which depth and proven production at the SEC level, again, are legitimate concerns. That's not to say those guys couldn't step up, but it is a question mark nonetheless. So, for Dontavious Braswell, he could help the Gamecocks elevate their floor on the offensive side of the ball by being a running back that the coaching staff can trust with the football in his hands. And who knows, if he performs well enough in fall camp and throughout the season, maybe Dontavious Braswell is the kid that ends up becoming the starter, the primary back in that position group. It'll all just depend on, of course, how things play out in front of him, both in terms of performance and injuries, much like his fellow freshman teammate and offensive lineman Markee Anderson. So, Nyckoles Harbor, Markee Anderson, Dontavious Braswell, these three guys, they're going to be relied on almost immediately, with the exception of Harbor. But all three of these guys, because of sort of what's going on at their position groups heading into this upcoming fall, they're all going to be potentially key pieces for this Gamecock football team. And if they can reach their potential for their freshman seasons, then they could help elevate the floor for South Carolina's program this season. Now, who are the players that could help elevate South Carolina's floor when it comes to the defensive side of the ball? I got a few players that I want to discuss with y'all in just a couple of moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. But first, today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are the best shorts that you could possibly get on the market right now. These shorts are going to fit everything that you are looking for when it comes to clothing. They're going to fit you really well. These shorts are extremely comfortable, and I can attest because I got some shorts from Bird Dogs, and they are also extremely versatile. Take it from Bert Kreischer, a guy that quite literally wakes up at his lake house wearing his Bird Dogs. He'll go for a swim, smoke a cigar, then once he is tired of being in the water, he'll get out and grill some burgers with the Bird Dog shorts still fitting him quite well, and then chilling with his family all in the shorts that he associates with the summer in Bird Dogs. So, if you want the best shorts of the summer, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege right now. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order that you make. Welcome back to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. Thank you so much to all of you everydayers for tuning in to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast every single day. And for those of you who are looking to keep up with South Carolina's baseball team, The Gamecocks are still alive in the SEC tournament but are facing elimination as they play the Texas A&M Aggies later this morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Catch every pitch of the South Carolina Gamecocks hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app by searching South Carolina or Gamecocks. Now, let's get back to the true freshman that could help to elevate the floor or set the floor either way for South Carolina's football program in 2023. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball now. And when it comes to players who could set the floor for this team, we got to start with edge defender Desmond Umeozulu. He is one of the most technically and athletically sound edge rushers that the Gamecocks have signed in the past several cycles. He is a kid that is joining a position group that is a bit of a mixed bag right now in terms of the overall circumstances. You've got a guy in Jordan Stroud who's coming back for his 7th season of college football, but he's coming off of a torn ACL that he suffered this past fall. You've also got Syracuse transfer Jatius Geard now, who is going to be in the room, and is a guy that is going to be adjusting from ACC competition to SEC competition. And then there's some other players that have been in the program for at least a year or so. Guys like Brian Thomas Jr., Tyreek Johnson, and Terrell Dawkins, who right now it seems like are more so rotating pieces, with maybe the exception of Brian Thomas Jr. So when taking all this into account, Desmond Umeozulu is a guy that could set the floor by being reliable in pass rush and also just being able to handle the status quo responsibilities when it comes to rush defense. Basically, just doing the little things right and not feeling like that he's got to be Superman and make a play all by himself every time he is out there on the football field. Umeozulu is going to play a big part of this position group and South Carolina's defensive front as a whole, and he is certainly somebody that will decide where that floor is going to be set, not just for South Carolina's defense, but the entire football team as well. Another player in South Carolina's defensive front who is going to help set the floor for the Gamecocks in 2023 is true freshman linebacker Grayson Pup Howard, who, in my opinion, and probably the opinion of many Gamecock fans, is going to be a future team captain. I mean, this guy has got all of the leadership qualities that you could possibly want. He comes from a military family. He's a kid that was a really productive linebacker at Andrew Jackson High School down in Jacksonville, Florida for the last several years. And he's a guy that's going to bring an old school play style as a downhill backer who is going to make his presence felt in the run game, but can also handle sort of some of the modern day aspects of the game as well by being able to run sideline to sideline and at times also sit back into coverage, especially in the flat. Now, Grayson Pup Howard is joining a linebacker room that has more depth than a lot of people outside the program realize. A room that is full of versatile skill sets when breaking down all of the individual players. However, the starting group for this linebacker room isn't a season-long guarantee. You got guys like Devo Williams and Stone Blanton, who again have been in the program for at least a year or two now, and they took the bulk of the first team snaps in spring practice. You've also got Muhammad Kaba, who could be coming back off of a torn ACL that he suffered this past season. And hey, if he bounces back into form, then Kaba could be one of the two backers in that starting group. But it's also the second time he has torn an ACL. So we just don't know how Muhammad Kaba is going to bounce back from this injury. And then the other guys, Bam Martin Scott, Donovan Westmoreland, and Jerron Willis, you know, those guys, again, they all bring something to the table, but they're probably not going to be every down linebackers in Clayton White's defense. So this could open the door a great deal for Grayson Pup Howard in terms of potentially breaking into the starting lineup. But either way, Grayson Pup Howard will help to set the floor for the Gamecocks by just taking some of the pressure off of Muhammad Kaba, make sure he doesn't feel like that he has to get back into the lineup or rotation as quickly as possible, and also take some of the pressure off of the veteran linebackers that will be playing. Again, more than likely right now, Stone Blanton and Devo Williams until further notice. ensure that those guys feel like that they don't have to basically play the majority of the game to help this defense make an impact in the run game. If Grayson Pup Howard can do that, then he will certainly help to elevate the floor for the Gamecocks this next season. And then the last player I want to talk about in terms of setting the floor for South Carolina is cornerback Vicari Swain. This cat is probably the second best pound-for-pound athlete in the entire recruiting class for 2023, right behind Nyckoles Harbor. In my opinion, Vicari Swain is kind of reminiscent of Darius Rush, both in terms of his path to this position and also what he's going to bring to the table. Darius Rush was a guy that obviously brought a pretty big frame for his position, but he was also someone that was very fluid in terms of his overall lower body movement, again, for the amount of length that his body carries. I think that Vicari Swain has the potential to be a more fluid and smaller Darius Rush in Torian Gray's defensive secondary. Now, Vicari Swain, kind of like Grayson Pup Howard, he's not joining a position group that's necessarily in dire straits of having someone like him joining the position right away. This is a group that has some solid backups in guys like Emory Floyd, Keenan Nelson Jr., and also a Kawan Banks. But Vicari Swain, of course, could end up potentially breaking into the two deep just because of the athleticism that he's going to bring to the table. So, how could he help set the floor for the Gamecocks this next season? Well, Vicari Swain, because he missed spring practice especially, he is going to need to be a sponge throughout fall camp and the entire upcoming season, and should prepare like he is the starter every Saturday in 2023. If Vicari Swain does both of those things, then there's no doubt that he will probably not only contribute to South Carolina's defense in 2023, but also help to, again, elevate the floor for South Carolina this upcoming season. But with that being said, y'all, that is going to do it for today's show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show, as always. What are your thoughts on the players from South Carolina's 2023 class that could help set the floor for the team in 2023? Do you think that I nailed my selections, or do you think that there's some guys that maybe I missed and should have talked about more? Also, what are your thoughts on South Carolina's impending matchup with the Texas A&M Aggies in the SEC baseball tournament? Let me know your thoughts on both of those topics down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. Shoot me a direct message on Twitter at @aline_SC. My DMs are always open to any questions that y'all have, so feel free to hit me up on social media. Once again, thank y'all so much for tuning in to today's show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.